Work out an estimate for the mean from a group frequency table. Our first step is to add two additional columns. Our first column is called our midpoint, and our last column is our midpoint multiplied by our frequency. To find the midpoint, as the name suggests, we just go in the middle of each of our class intervals, i.e. what's in the middle of 150 and 250, in this case 200. For our next class interval, what's in the middle of 250 and 350, in this case 300. Our next class interval, what's in the middle of 350 to 450, in this case 400. Our next class interval, what's in the middle between 450 and 550, in this case 500. And finally, our last class interval, what's in the middle of 550 and 650, in this case 600. We then multiply the midpoint by the frequency. Looking at our first row, 200 times 1 will give us 200. Looking at our next row, 300 times 11 will give us 3,300. Looking at our next row, 400 times 5 will give us 2,000. Looking at our next row, 500 times 0 will give us 0. And looking at our final row, 600 times 3 will give us 1,800. We then total, i.e. add together, the column of our midpoint times our frequency. On a non-calculator paper, we know 1,800 add 200 will give us 2,000. Add 3,300 will give us 5,300. Add another 2,000 will give us 7,300. And then add 0 will still give us 7,300 in total. And then we always total our frequency. In this case, we are told in the question there was 20 people. So therefore, our total frequency is going to equal to 20. As we want to find an estimate for mean, we then always do the total of our midpoint times frequency. In this case, our 7,300. And we always divide by our total frequency. In this case, 20, as there was 20 people. On a non-calculator paper, as we can see both the top and the bottom both end in a 0, I can divide top and bottom by 10, i.e. cancel 0. And I know 730 divided by 2 will give us 365.
Write down the modal class interval.